Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown Loan Report series, our show in which every single month we give you an update of what's going on in the world of Arsenal's loan players. I'm very happy to be joined by Ben from the Marseille View, as always. How you doing, my friend? You good?
Good. Been a good run of form for us and Saliba, and we can finally debrief his international appearances.
Yes. I mean, if I'd have said to you, like when we first started doing these shows way back in, September, if Saliba would have made a start for the French national team, would you have predicted that?
Not such a rapid rise, no. Just I think it's purely based on the fact that, Deschamps got a reputation for being a coach that sticks with his men and doesn't make changes. And especially leading up to a World Cup, I would have been like, no, I don't think he's got a chance, maybe after the World Cup. But the fact he's been in there and he's impressed, it's just a testament to his massive upshot in form and notoriety this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to go into kind of some of the statistics, and obviously I want to hear more about his. I want to hear more really, and mainly about the France side of things. So we'll tackle the stats first from the month of March. So these is obviously 8 more games that took place since we last spoke. They include the end of February as well, because we caught up pretty soon after the January window. The 2-0 loss to Clermont-Foot, which is a little bit of an odd one, an odd result that was. 3-0 win over Karabag, which of course allowed you to progress into the next stage of the Conference League. A 1-1 draw with Troyes, a 1-0 loss to Monaco, 2 2-1 wins over Basel, again to progress to the next stage, a 4-1 win over Brest, and a 2-1 win over a very good Nice side this season as well. So interesting though to see that despite that, defensively, some of those success rates have taken a bit of a dip. Why do you think that is?
Well, as you've said, just after you've just gone through the results, we had a really bad run of form. I think we didn't win for like 3 or 4 games in a row. So Saliba wasn't the main culprit there. It was just a system point of view. People think that the team just looked short of ideas. It was a bit of a classic scenario where we were passing the ball around the opposition defence for an hour, and we concede a goal on a counter attack, and then end up losing the game. And that's what happened against Clermont. That's what happened against Monaco. I just think that the whole team went through a bad patch. Saliba found himself exposed, as did the rest of our defence. And when you're suffering an onslaught, eventually you'll crack if the rest of the team aren't pulling their weight. There's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a similar story with his passing as well. The success rate of the passing has dipped. I always like to caveat this with Saliba starting off the season ridiculously well, so it was always going to be a case of him dipping. His passing accuracy at 93.8% did remain the same, and he's attempted more passes as well during across those 8 games to up his average across the 40 that he's played so far this season. But is he still maintaining kind of that regular progressive style that he's always kind of instilled in his game this season?
Indeed, yeah. So we went through again a bad patch where we weren't playing free at the back again. So for whatever reason, Sampaoli, the coach, changed the system. It led to a cock-up. Then he reverted back to the system that worked so well. And lo and behold, the team started winning again. So,
why did he switch it?
He's
I suppose trying to get into the mind of why Sampaoli is
it's like trying to analyse Bielsa. It's the same character. A bit unpredictable, a bit thinks that he's too clever sometimes. Anyway, it led to a bad run of form, and despite that, Saliba he was sort of playing as 2 centre backs during that period, and now for the last sort of 4 games we've gone back to 3 at the back, and he's been back to his usual contribution, which is getting forward, being a bit of the sort of furthest back playmaker in the team with the goalkeeper. So whenever there's a goal kick or whatever, typically he's the first person to touch the ball and to distribute from there. And then he pushes on forwards. And when we are dominating, he's often spends large parts of the game in the opposition half.
It's a player that obviously we know what he brings to the team, and we've seen Ben White flourish in this kind of similar role with
very similar, yeah.
Yeah, and interestingly, when they did play for their national teams, both playing on the right hand side of a back three as well. So there's so many similarities there. But what they do also share is his ability to take the ball out from the back. And despite him dipping in defensive and passing success, ironically his dribbling and on the ball skills have gone up in the last 8 games.
No, we know what he's capable of. I watch him week in, week out. But even if Gooners were to watch highlight reels even before you signed him or the last few years, you can tell he's a player who's got ability on the ball. He's not afraid to take someone on. He's not afraid to, if he sees an opportunity for a dribble or a bit of a skill, he can pull it off because he's got that ability. So it enables him to get forward. It enables him to be a bit of a threat in the opposition half. And as I've said, the last 5 games, we've got 5 wins in a row, and he's been no stranger to that. And he's played a big part, notably against Nice in the first half when I think we had like 80% possession for half an hour. It was all of the balls from the back were going through him, and he was making quite a few runs forward as well.
Let's move on to the highlight of the show, really, which is obviously talking about his performances for France. I mean, first of all, he was called up to replace Benjamin Pavard. There are other players like Konate that wasn't called up to the team, mainly because playing time, hasn't been playing regularly for Liverpool. Was you still surprised that he got the nods over some other options? Kurt Zouma, I mean, obviously we've had the issues with Kurt Zouma behind the scenes of football. So, but are you surprised that he got the nod?
I think the timing of it was I wouldn't say odd, but it was very convenient. As you've said, there were other players that Deschamps selected before that he could have quite easily gone with and trusted again. I think that they just want to get a proper look at him. They've been watching his assistants, been at quite a few of the Marseille games over the last month, actually. Watching Boubacar Kamara, watching Guendouzi, who got his first goal for France as well last night. It's just been. I think he was on the list. He was always going to be there or thereabouts. If I had to gamble and tell you, do I think he'll go to the World Cup? If nobody's injured, I don't think he gets a look in for the World Cup squad this time. Guendouzi, on the contrary, I think he's established himself now in that squad somehow. But
Saliba, why did you say somehow?
Well, I say somehow because we all know what it was like at Arsenal for him and the opinion of many of Arsenal fans, and I think somehow because it just goes to show. I mean, the press can type shit. Everybody can make things up. There could be stories about his discipline, etc. You don't play for a national team as stacked as France if you're a troublemaker and you're not a good footballer. And the fact is,
can a person change though, Ben? Can a person change?
Did he ever need to? Did he ever need to change? I think we've said it before on the show. He needed the right coach, maybe in the right environment, and he seems to have found it. And long may it continue for Marseille's sake and France's sake. But for Saliba, I think it was just a very pleasant surprise. He's been on very good form, as we know. But if there were other players, I would have thought that would have gotten a nod ahead of him, just because based on the fact they've played Deschamps selected them before, and he's gone with the form players, and it's great. I think he was also very fortunate because the first game against Ivory Coast was in Marseille as well. So for the first time since Euro 2016, I think the national team have played outside of Paris in Marseille, and so it was. The crowd was obviously was France, but it was and every time he touched the ball, massive roar, massive cheers. What better way to start your international career than in your temporary home stadium with a fan base that loves you and knows that you're one of our best players this year. So you got massive encouragement from that. He had a pretty solid 30 minutes on Friday night. And then again last night he got the nod and started the game against South Africa. I mean, not a huge footballing nation, let's face it. And if you're going to give someone their first start in the international squad, it's going to be against a friendly, you would think. But again, very calm, very composed, just what we come to expect from him. And he is an experienced professional now. He's got over 100 odd games played at pro level. Very young player. The parallels with being drawn with Raphael Varane are pretty striking. He's on the same path.
Pretty much. I mean, you can't really see I mean, I remember when he was actually signing for Arsenal from Saint Etienne. That was the tag. It was he's the next Rafa Varane. And what I found interesting was obviously the positioning of where he was played in a back three, which, for France. I mean, I've been saying for a long time with the way in which France's fullbacks have been for years. Why don't they switch to a back three? Because it just makes so much more sense. And it seems like they've got the perfect players for that now. I mean, even Pavard, when he's available, going into that right centre-back slot, I think fits into that role, really well as well.
You just hope that someone sees him for the fraud he is, but hey.
But interesting, I mean, when Jules Koundé came on, Saliba went to the middle of that three as well.
He's been doing that. He's been doing that for Marseille actually as well recently. So in some games when we've changed it up, for whether it's been personnel-wise, so for example, brought an extra striker on if we needed to, or brought on an extra midfielder to pack the midfield, he's often gone to the bottom of that back three. And he's just a player that can play anywhere in that defence. I think he's he's learned so much under a coach that will experiment and will try and use him as an attacking threat, and as a part of the possession style approach that we have that Sampaoli has at Marseille. So he's proven that he can handle all sorts of different tactics, all sorts of systems, and it's going to be very beneficial for his long-term career, I reckon, education-wise.
Let's tackle the difficult thing that we always do at the end of these shows, and we talk about his Arsenal future. Now, I've put a poll into the chat box this evening asking the question, will Saliba be at Arsenal next season? 79% of people said yes, which I'm going to be honest, shocks me that is the level, because if I was personally voting in this poll at this moment in time, I'd be saying no. I don't think he will be at Arsenal next season. The reason why I think that is to a number of factors. I think the fact he's got into the French national team will give him plenty of kind of incentive to ensure that he is playing week in, week out at the start of next season ahead of the World Cup. Because if there is any hope of him getting into the World Cup squad, which, is still slim because there's a lot of players that weren't available to Deschamps, he needs to be playing. And if he's just playing the European games or playing the cup games, the Carabao Cup games for Arsenal, that's not going to happen. He's not going to get picked. He needs to be playing week in, week out. So I think that actually, whilst we want to look at this French call-up as a really positive thing for Saliba, from an Arsenal perspective, it probably isn't. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's not positive for Marseille's hopes of keeping him either, let's face it. I mean, the only way that I think Marseille have a sliver of hope of keeping him is maybe extending his loan another year. But even that, maybe that's the right thing for both parties, and maybe that's the best outcome for both parties here, because he gets, Arsenal keep him on the books. He gets another year at Marseille where, touch wood, we qualify for the Champions League, so he gets Champions League football. He starts the games. He gets into the international squads. It could be the best outcome for both parties. Now, I think a lot of teams are going to wake up and realise, Jesus, right, there's a real opportunity in the market here. Really young centre back, just broken into the French squads. If you're Juventus, a Bayern Munich, a Real Madrid, even a Barcelona, you need a centre back next year. Yeah, it's a no-brainer, really. You'd make an offer, even PSG to some extent. I mean,
that's the team I'm looking at. Actually, I'm looking at PSG and thinking Marquinhos is getting on.
I don't know if they're savvy enough. It's going to depend. It's going to depend on the changes.
Bias, though, Ben.
Well, I think we can all look at their recent performances in the last few years, and you can just tell they've cocked it up completely in the transfer strategy. So, will they go down the route of signing French players? They haven't so far. They've had some of the best French youngsters come through their academy in recent years, like Kingsley Coman and Rabiot, and they've let them go. So, I don't know. From his point of view, I'd be going abroad. I wouldn't be going to PSG. You'd think you've got to be smart. If Real Madrid comes knocking, it's a no-brainer, really.
Do you think he's good enough to play there week in, week out next season?
I think he is. Yeah, if they're rebuilding, in any of those teams, they're powerhouses, right? It's a different solution than a challenger team that needs consistent performers, that maybe needs a squad that's gelled together. Yeah, which is probably one of the main reasons he might struggle if he did go back to Arsenal to get a look in, as you've seen, because Arteta's incentive is if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? So why would he go and change the spine of the team to accommodate a youngster? Look, that's it really. If you go to a Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, you're a powerhouse. You're pretty
You
much
can
guaranteed.
afford to give them more time. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also, they're not going to be threatened as much because you've got Casemiro in front of you, and you've got Toni Kroos and Modric, and then you go to Bayern Munich. It's just, it's an incredible unit of a team, and
yeah, Joshua Kimmich playing ahead of you. So.
Yeah, but it just means that you're not getting threatened as much, and you can adopt the same approach that he's learned this year, which is to be more attacking and more possession based.
From an Arsenal perspective, I've said and continue to say that Ben White has been better than Saliba this season.
From a Premier League point of view, it's a no-brainer, right? He's an English player. He's come and established himself. Saliba is a gamble. Even though he's been on form this year, it's a gamble to go and change it up next year, because the first bad game that he has, he's going to get some of the fan
I don't know if he is, though. That's the thing. I think there's such a aura and such a willingness from the fan base for him to get minutes. I don't know if he would be set upon immediately or not.
I don't know, but you never know. Like, every team has its toxic fans. Arsenal more than others, sadly, for some of the most ridiculous topics. But the Premier League's a different beast. He's been doing well in the French league. I think the real test is if this is it for Arsenal, really. Is if what if you leave him in Marseille for a year and he gets Champions League experience? Then what? What if he proves he can do it there? Then suddenly you've got a lot more confidence if you're Arteta and you're challenging to be or play in the Premier League. Who knows? Marseille and Arsenal could draw each other in the group stage, and Saliba could face Arsenal, and that's even better chance for all of you to get a look at him. But who knows? If he stays, I think it's a good environment for him. And yes, he's guaranteed to be a starter. Arsenal, it all comes down to what Arteta wants to do, doesn't it? Really.
And that's the big question: is we just don't know at this stage what he wants to do, with Saliba. I mean, I was listening to the Arscast early on this week. James McNicholas went out to Marseille and spent time there, and on that show, he said that the feeling is, and from what he said, and he admitted he might be wrong, but from what he's been hearing, there's no, encouragement that Saliba will return and Saliba will play. And despite Edu and Ben Napper, who's the lone executive at Arsenal, going and watching him in, I think it was November, they haven't been back. There's not been regular contact between them. Arsenal sent Saliba their congratulations to him behind the scenes when he got the France call up, but there's not been this kind of weekly check-in. How's it going? How are you getting on? We're missing you, sort of thing. Not necessarily that what I'm getting at. There's not that relationship. There's not that encouragement there. So that's why I have so many doubts about this. For the last 5 or 10 minutes, though, we will take a couple of questions from the chat box. Stan the Man says, why can't Saliba just come in, work hard, and try to dislodge someone for more game time?
Well, he could, but the question is, if he's now acquired the status, I think you said it, Tom. If he's acquired the status and let's imagine between now and then he gets called up to the front squad again, and suddenly, part and parcel of that is you have to be playing regularly. That's going to weigh in your minds, because from his point of view, if he gets Marseille to the Champions League group stage through the league qualification. Imagine, touch wood, we're still in the Conference League, we're in the quarterfinals, we're on the easier side of the draw. We could challenge for that as well. And if you come back to Arsenal with that status and you're like, right, well, actually, I am a bit more established now. I know that you had a good season last year. There are other internationals in that defence, but I'm not coming back to sit on the bench. So either you play me in August in pre-season and I get established and you figure a way to fit me into this system that seems to be working really well, or I go back out on loan to Marseille, or you sell me. But I don't think there's any incentive for him to take the risk of going back and without guarantees over his playing time.
Yeah. Temi, if Saliba is the Mbappe of centre-backs, surely you should be able to best Ben White and Gabriel in training and take their place in the starting lineup. I mean, this builds on from what I was saying. There is so much hype and enthusiasm around Saliba that actually so many people build up a perspective of him without ever having watched him play. And the fact of the matter is, from my perspective of watching him, and then from speaking to you as well, Ben, is that for all of his qualities and all of the potential, he still needs to develop. There are still so many parts of his game that he needs to improve upon.
He's 21 years old.
Yeah. So he doesn't start ahead of Ben White and Gabriel right now because they're established, consistent Premier League performers.
Exactly that. I think it's, even if he did challenge and even if he was able to carry this form over, the Premier League's a different beast. It's a massive step up, especially Arsenal that, you know, have a bit of a tendency. I mean, this all depends on how Arteta handles, you know, whatever the end of the season, and if Arsenal get top four and get budget and can spend and get some, you know, get one player per line in that's a top player, then if he's got a really good defensive midfielder in front of him and Arsenal don't look, I mean, this year they haven't clearly, but it's the first time in years that Arsenal haven't looked like they've got that weak sort of spine. Then it's a different beast because you're more protected and maybe the approach and build up and everything's different. But, you know, if it's a situation where he comes in and, you know, all it takes is, for example, imagine it's like this year where for whatever reason there's injuries and people are missing, and then if you get the bad luck of the draw, your first three games are Chelsea, City and Liverpool or someone else. And, you know, if you get battered in those games because the squad's still finding its feet after pre-season or whatever reason, there's just so much potential for him to not bed in. And also it's just more challenging, more demanding than Premier League. And as you've said, I think Ben White and Gabriel, they're complementary because left-footed and right-footed for a start. Unless Arsenal switch to a back three, I just don't think there's a place for Saliba in the starting lineup unless he impresses the socks off of the coaching staff.
Yeah,
if and when he returns to Arsenal this summer.
And whilst I think he's done pretty much as he feasibly could at Marseille this season to convince Arteta and the squad that he is worthy of a place in the squad.
Yep.
You know, the facts is that his prerogative is going to be game time. I mean, I interviewed Emmanuel Petit the other day on the Arsenal Way, and he said if he's Saliba, you know, he needs guarantees and he needs to be told that he's going to get minutes. And you're not going to get that. It's the reason why Emi Martinez left the club, because despite playing really well in the games when Bernd Leno was injured and winning an FA Cup for us, Arteta couldn't promise him minutes because Bernd Leno was still there. And so he left. And that's probably how I see the Saliba situation going down. Now, from a financial perspective, you hear figures in the region of 50 million plus being touted around. In my opinion, I think Arsenal will and should break even at a minimum for what they paid of £27 million and maybe be able to get a bit more. But I
reckon 35, 40 is a fair price,
Yeah, I think 35 to 40 million pounds is about what he is worth in today's market. And yet you see when in people in discussions, no, we shouldn't sell him for anything less than 50 million. And it's like the level of kind of, you know, I don't want to call it naivety, but maybe I suppose that it is that what he's kind of rated and where he's kind of at. And again, it's this reputation that's been built up around Saliba that's got people really obsessive over him. I want him to come back to Arsenal as a minimum. I want him to come back. I want him to succeed. I know that what we've got, I know we've got a brilliant talent in our hands. I'm just realistic to the situation that is, he has 2 years left on his deal. He's got the ball in his court. He knows that he can probably get a move elsewhere because there's going to be a lot of teams interested in him, as you said earlier. And teams like Real Madrid, teams like Bayern Munich that may have an interest in him can afford to play him more. One, because, you know, they're a huge club in a league where they dominate typically, and they've got enough players around to support him and give him plenty of time without risking results, which is not the case at Arsenal right now.
No, they can't, because if Arsenal make top four, it needs, you know, Arsenal needs to build on that and at least do the same again the following season.
I'll ask you for your final prediction, and we do this every single month, but do you think he'll stay at Arsenal?
It's looking, I think, like more like it's going to be a big topic this summer. Maui's got the France call up. I think it's gonna be a bit of a saga that hopefully doesn't drag on too long. I mean, ideally, you know, Marseille find a way, and he's come out and said that he has desired to stay if he can. We don't know if that's if a lot of players say that just because they feel good in the moment and things are going well. But if there is a way for us to keep him another year on loan, it's the best outcome for all parties. I think if Arsenal manage to time down to an extension, for example, and if he takes another step up and establishes himself in the national team and plays Champions League football next year, then it's a no-brainer for all parties, right? I just think it's more and more difficult for both those reasons, because he's now stepped up in terms of a bit of his stature and his status, but also Arsenal are doing really well without him.
Just lastly from Manu, I do want to tackle this. What was the point of the loan if whatever he did was never going to guarantee a place in the team? Don't believe the shambles, gets me furious. The point is that Arsenal are learning from their mistakes of the past. They need to protect his value. And by sending him to a place where he plays week in, week out at Marseille and gets into the France team, they can probably recoup as much, if not more, of the money that they paid if they are to let him go. So that's why.
Pretty much. And criticise all you want. But if you look at Chelsea's model over the last, well, certainly not very recently, but 10 years ago, they had 40 of these players out on loan. And effectively, what did that enable them to do is that every summer they'd sell a couple of them for 10, 15 million. And then it just props up your sort of reputation as a sort of academy club and developing club that loans players out. I'm not saying that Arsenal is comparable because it's nowhere near the volume that Chelsea were doing it, but it's the same idea, right? Look, we've got a kid on our hands. It was always going to be a gamble. He came in, he didn't establish himself day one. Guess what? He's only 21, as you've said. We've loaned him out. He's playing week in, week out. He's playing well. Very worst case scenario, we make a bit of profit on him or break even, but you've not lost anything, because if it had worked out and he had established himself at Arsenal, everybody would be over the moon. And so at least you're not losing anything. It's if you compare it, for example, to the Nicola Pepe situation, that's one where Arsenal are going to take a massive hit when they move him on, because it's a gamble that didn't pay off, and they spend too much on him. But those were the prices in those days in the crazy market back then. But that's when you compare it. If they had loaned him after 1 year and he'd shown somewhere else, then they could have recouped maybe 80% of their investment on him. The fact that he hasn't gone elsewhere and he's struggled to establish himself at Arsenal, be consistent. I think Arsenal do well to get 40 million for him, let alone anywhere near the 70 they paid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think for Pepe we're getting anything close to 30 million, to be honest. We will see. And I mean, one of the biggest weaknesses of Arsenal's been selling. Sorry, go on.
No, it just goes to show that it's the comparisons there, is that if you loan someone out and they're successful, at the very least, they don't lose their value. But you also look good, Arsenal as a club with the reputation of, well, we did right by the kids. He wasn't going to get game time with us. We loaned him out, and he's an investment. He's a gamble. He was always a gamble. And whether they get whatever they paid for him or he comes back to Arsenal and establishes himself, it's still a win-win situation, let's face it, because Arsenal aren't losing anything.
Yeah. No, I think that's the positive way to look at it, is that either Saliba comes back, plays, integrates into the squad, and you've got the great asset. Hopefully, I don't think what Arsenal will be like is that if they can convince him to sign a new contract in the summer, I think he will go. But if he does go, from the way they've handled the situation this season by giving him this loan to Marseille, they've protected the value, and they should be able to break even or get more than what they paid for Saliba. And that will hurt the fans, because the fans, have been excited and, curious about Saliba for so long. But it's just the situation. It's just the situation that we find ourselves in. But
Guendouzi is the biggest steal for us this year. But
look, Guendouzi is a whole separate podcast. It's a whole separate podcast. But that's one of the things that hopefully we've learned from, and one of the reasons why we didn't. When Marseille wanted an option in Saliba's loan, Arsenal refused. And we're going to see the benefit of that this summer if he does end up moving on. Thank you, Chatbox, for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. Do subscribe. Ben, thank you so much for coming on, mate. As always, tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to. Just
at the Marseille View on Twitter, guys. If we debrief the Marseille games, but also Saliba quite regularly. An interesting run of games coming up for Marseille if you get the chance to tune in. we could be in a European Cup semi-final in 3 weeks' time. Even though it's the shit Conference League,
I was going to say,
especially in the year when,
yeah.
Well, it's in a year where your biggest rivals PSG have shut themselves once again. We'll take it because we'll rub it in their faces for years to come if we do win it somehow. So, yeah, tune in. You can see Saliba in bigger games than just the Ligue 1 games. And actually, our run-in for the rest of the season is pretty tight. We're playing PSG in three weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks time away, and then we're playing all of the teams that are directly around us in this Champions League run-in. So the pressure will be on, and it's going to be an interesting end to the season. And we're heavily reliant on Saliba carrying on his good form and getting us to Champions League.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you so much, mate, as always, for coming on the channel. Thank you guys for listening. You can obviously check out us tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. as always. And tomorrow evening, we'll be doing our next episode of our tactical breakdown updates with the youth team involved. We'll be joined by Kev, aka Next Generation Arsenal, to be talking about Balogun and Brooke Norton-Cuffy's really exciting move through Lincoln and how he could be the next player to come through and be our very own Trent Alexander-Arnold. So plenty of exciting stuff to discuss with the youth side. But thank you for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video. Do share it with your friends. And as always, up the Arsenal.